The betting started before Sergeant Elena Vasquez even picked up her tray. $5, says the kitchen help won't last 2 minutes. Recruit Morrison whispered to his companions, nodding toward the woman in standard-issue fatigues approaching the serving line. The other 4 recruits exchanged knowing grins, their confidence radiating across the bustling mess hall like heat from the industrial ovens. Elena heard every word. 3 months working food service at Camp Pendleton had sharpened her hearing to catch the subtle undercurrents of military conversation, the way voices carried differently when people thought they were speaking to empty air. Morrison's voice held that particular edge of young male certainty, the kind that assumed kitchen duty meant weakness, that serving food somehow diminished capability. The mess hall stretched before her in institutional beige and military efficiency, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across rows of metal tables where 200 Marines consumed their evening meal. Steam rose from serving trays laden with meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the familiar aroma mixing with disinfectant and floor wax in a combination that had become oddly comforting over the past months. But tonight felt different. Tonight, 5 pairs of eyes tracked her movement with predatory focus. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed similar situations where assumptions proved dangerously wrong in your community. Morrison stood first, his frame towering over the orange plastic chair as he pushed back from his half-finished meal. At 6'3", with the kind of broad shoulders that came from serious weight training, he projected the physical confidence of someone accustomed to intimidation working in his favor. His companions followed his lead like a well-rehearsed formation. Daniels, compact but muscular with the quick movements of a former wrestler. Parker, lean and rangy with calculating eyes that suggested he enjoyed psychological games as much as physical ones. Williams, built like a linebacker with hands that dwarfed the plastic utensils he abandoned on his tray. Rodriguez, the youngest of the group, but eager to prove himself worthy of their acceptance. Elena continued toward the serving line, her pace unchanged, her expression neutral. She had learned to read groups like this during her years of training, to assess threat levels and tactical disadvantages with the same automatic precision other people use to check their pulse. 5 against 1 in a confined space with limited exit routes. Multiple witnesses, but no immediate authority presence. Standard harassment pattern beginning with verbal intimidation, likely escalating to physical confrontation if she showed fear or attempted to flee. Her boots made soft sounds against the polished concrete floor, each step measured and deliberate. The regulation fatigues hung loose on her frame, designed for utility rather than flattery, hiding the lean muscle beneath layers of camouflage fabric. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that met military grooming standards while revealing nothing about the hands that had arranged it, hands that possessed capabilities these 5 young men could not begin to imagine. Morrison reached the serving line first, positioning himself directly in her path while his companions spread out in a loose semicircle behind him. The formation was instinctive rather than planned, the natural hunting pattern of predators who had never encountered prey that might hunt them back. Other Marines continued eating, most absorbed in their own conversations, though a few began to notice the developing situation with the idle curiosity of people watching a minor drama unfold. "Kitchen duty," Morrison said, his voice loud enough to carry to nearby tables. "Must be nice having such an easy assignment while the rest of us handle real military work." Elena met his gaze directly, her expression remaining calm despite the obvious challenge in his tone. She had faced down insurgents in Fallujah, navigated hostile territory in Afghanistan, completed operations that would remain classified for decades. 5 recruits in a mess hall represented a different kind of challenge, one requiring restraint rather than elimination. The confrontation was beginning. The mess hall's ambient noise seemed to fade as Morrison stepped closer, reducing the space between them to less than arm's length. His companions tightened their formation, creating a wall of muscle and manufactured intimidation that blocked Elena's direct path to the exit. The tactical disadvantage was obvious to anyone with basic military training, but these recruits operated under assumptions that had never been tested against real opposition. "You know what I think?" Morrison continued, his voice dropping to a tone meant to sound menacing while remaining just below the threshold that might attract official attention. "I think they stuck you in the kitchen because you couldn't handle real Marine Corps training. Probably washed out of boot camp and got assigned to serve real Marines their meals." Daniels laughed, a sound that carried more cruelty than humor. "Yeah, but she never even held a rifle, much less fired one." The comment drew nods from Parker and Williams, their confidence feeding off each other in the way group dynamics amplified individual arrogance. Rodriguez remained slightly behind the others, his eagerness to belong warring with an instinct that something about this situation felt different than their usual intimidation games. Elena's peripheral vision cataloged the developing situation with practiced efficiency. 47 other Marines within the immediate vicinity, most focused on their meals, but several beginning to pay attention to the confrontation. 3 possible exit routes, all currently blocked by the recruits' positioning. Kitchen staff behind the serving counter, 2 sergeants, and a corporal who would likely intervene if the situation escalated beyond verbal harassment. No officers visible in the immediate area. The serving line stretched empty beside them, the stainless steel counters reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting in distorted patterns. Steam continued rising from the food warmers, carrying the heavy sense of institutional cooking that masked the subtle tension beginning to permeate this corner of the mess hall. Elena noted the distance to the nearest tray dispenser, the weight and balance of the metal serving spoons, the exact positioning of each recruit relative to potential improvised weapons. "Look at her," Parker said, his voice taking on the sing-song quality of someone enjoying psychological manipulation. "Just standing there like a statue. Probably too scared to even speak up for herself." His eyes glittered with the particular malice of someone who had discovered a new form of entertainment. "But she's never been in a real fight in her life." The irony of the statement would have been amusing under different circumstances. Elena had engaged in more actual combat than all 5 recruits combined, had killed enemy combatants in close-quarter situations that would have left these young men paralyzed with terror. But revealing that information would require explanations she was not authorized to provide would compromise an assignment that had taken months to establish. Williams moved closer from her left side, his bulk creating additional psychological pressure while maintaining the illusion of casual conversation. "Maybe we should teach her what real Marines are like," he suggested, his tone carrying implications that made several nearby Marines look up from their meals with growing interest. "Show her how things work around here." Elena's breathing remained steady, her heart rate unchanged despite the escalating threats. The physiological control came from years of training in environments where panic meant death, where the ability to remain calm under pressure separated survivors from casualties. These recruits had probably never faced genuine life-threatening situations, had never learned to distinguish between manufactured drama and actual danger. The kitchen staff behind the counter had begun to notice the developing confrontation, their movements becoming more cautious as they recognized the potential for violence. Sergeant Martinez, a 20-year veteran with 3 combat deployments, caught Elena's eye with a questioning look that asked if she needed intervention. She gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, a gesture so subtle that only someone trained in tactical communication would recognize its meaning. Rodriguez finally found his voice, encouraged by the group dynamic, to contribute to the intimidation. "Yeah, kitchen duty. Real tough assignment. Probably gets to go home early while we're still running drills." His words carried less conviction than his companions, suggesting an uncertainty he tried to mask with artificial bravado. Morrison reached out as if to grab Elena's shoulder, his hand moving with the casual entitlement of someone accustomed to physical dominance going unchallenged. The gesture represented a line being crossed, The transition from verbal harassment to physical assault that would justify defensive action under any military code of conduct. Elena's muscles tensed in preparation, her body shifting almost imperceptibly into a stance that would provide optimal leverage for the techniques she had mastered in environments these recruits could barely imagine. The confrontation was about to escalate beyond words. Morrison's hand stopped inches from Elena's shoulder as she spoke for the first time since the confrontation began. "I would recommend you reconsider that action, Marine." Her voice carried none of the fear or intimidation the recruits expected, instead delivering the words with the calm authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life-threatening situations. The unexpected response momentarily disrupted their formation, creating a pause that Elena recognized as tactical opportunity. Morrison's hand hung, suspended in the air between them, his expression shifting from predatory confidence to confusion as he processed the complete absence of submission in her tone. His companions exchanged glances that revealed their first hint of uncertainty, the group dynamic wavering as their target failed to conform to expected patterns. "Did she just give me an order?" Daniels asked, his voice rising with manufactured outrage designed to mask his growing discomfort with the situation. "Some kitchen help thinks she can tell Marines what to do." The statement was meant to rally his companions back to their original purpose, but the words carried a hollow quality that suggested even he was beginning to sense something beyond their understanding. Elena's position remained unchanged, her stance appearing casual to untrained observers, while actually providing optimal balance and mobility for defensive maneuvers. Her hands rested naturally at her sides, fingers relaxed but positioned for instant deployment of techniques that could incapacitate multiple opponents within seconds. The recruits saw only a woman in standard fatigues who showed no signs of backing down from their intimidation. Parker stepped closer from her right side, attempting to re-establish the psychological pressure that had been disrupted by her unexpected response. "Real tough talk from someone whose biggest challenge is deciding whether to serve green beans or corn," he said, his voice carrying the forced aggression of someone trying to convince himself as much as his audience. "Bet you've never even been outside the wire." The phrase "outside the wire" referred to leaving the safety of military bases for combat operations, and Parker delivered it with the confidence of someone who assumed his target had never experienced genuine military action. Elena had spent 18 months outside the wire in some of the most dangerous territory on Earth, had conducted operations that required capabilities these recruits would never possess, but explaining that would compromise operational security and reveal information that was classified at levels beyond their clearance. Williams moved to close off her escape route toward the kitchen, his bulk creating additional pressure while maintaining the illusion that this was still casual conversation. "Maybe we should report her for insubordination," he suggested, his tone carrying threats wrapped in official procedure. Disrespecting Marines could get her kicked out of the service entirely. The irony was staggering. Elena held clearances that placed her among the most trusted members of the United States military, had undergone psychological evaluations and background investigations that exceeded anything these recruits would ever experience. Her service record contained commendations and achievements that would remain classified for decades, operations that had contributed directly to national security in ways the public would never fully understand. Rodriguez, emboldened by his companion's apparent confidence, decided to contribute his own escalation. "Yeah, and maybe we should teach her some respect while we're at it." His words carried implications that made several nearby Marines stop eating entirely, their attention now fully focused on the developing situation. The mess hall's background noise seemed to diminish as more personnel became aware that something significant was occurring near the serving line. Elena noted the shifting attention with tactical awareness, recognizing that increased observation would both limit the recruits' options and provide witnesses to whatever actions became necessary. Sergeant Martinez behind the serving counter had moved closer to the edge of his station, his body language indicating readiness to intervene if the situation crossed lines that would require official response. Two corporals at a nearby table had stopped their conversation entirely, their eyes fixed on the confrontation with the focused attention of experienced Marines who recognized developing trouble. Morrison's suspended hand finally moved, reaching toward Elena's shoulder with the aggressive entitlement of someone who had never encountered serious resistance to his physical dominance. The gesture represented the final escalation from verbal harassment to physical assault, crossing the threshold that would justify defensive action under any reasonable interpretation of military law. Elena's muscles prepared for movement, her training automatically calculating angles and leverage points that would provide maximum effectiveness with minimum visible effort. "You really don't want to do that," she said, her voice maintaining the same calm authority while carrying an undertone that suggested consequences beyond these recruits' imagination. The warning was delivered as a professional courtesy, the final opportunity for them to withdraw from a confrontation they could not possibly understand or survive intact. Morrison's hand continued its trajectory toward her shoulder, his expression showing the stubborn determination of someone committed to demonstrating dominance regardless of increasing evidence that his assumptions might be fundamentally flawed. Morrison's hand made contact with Elena's shoulder, his fingers gripping the fabric of her fatigues with the aggressive confidence of someone who had never faced genuine resistance. The physical contact crossed every line that separated harassment from assault, creating legal justification for defensive action that Elena had been carefully avoiding throughout the escalating confrontation. Her response was instantaneous and devastating. Elena's left hand moved with precision that defied visual tracking, capturing Morrison's wrist in a grip that utilized specific pressure points taught in facilities that did not officially exist. Her right hand struck his elbow with calculated force, hyperextending the joint beyond its natural range of motion while simultaneously stepping into his body space with footwork that demonstrated years of advanced combat training. Morrison's expression transformed from aggressive confidence to shocked agony in the space between heartbeats. His knees buckled as neural pathways flooded his brain with pain signals that his nervous system had never been designed to process. The grip on Elena's shoulder released involuntarily as his body's survival mechanisms overrode conscious control, leaving him gasping for breath while trying to comprehend what had just happened to his previously dominant position. The speed and efficiency of the technique left his four companions frozen in disbelief. Daniels stepped backward instinctively, his mind struggling to process how their largest and most physically imposing member had been reduced to helpless vulnerability by movements too fast and precise for untrained eyes to follow. Parker's calculating expression shifted to something approaching recognition, the first hint that this woman might possess capabilities beyond their understanding. "What the hell?" Williams stammered, his voice carrying confusion rather than anger as he watched Morrison struggle to remain upright while Elena maintained control of his arm with minimal apparent effort. The linebacker's eyes recruit found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about physical dominance and combat effectiveness. Elena's position allowed her to maintain control over Morrison while keeping visual contact with his four companions, her body positioning demonstrating tactical awareness that spoke to training environments these recruits had never experienced. Her breathing remained steady despite the physical exertion, her heart rate unchanged by the sudden violence in a way that suggested this was far from her first combat encounter. Rodriguez took a half-step forward, his loyalty to his companions warring with a growing instinct that they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Morrison was gasping against Elena's grip, his face pale with pain that clearly exceeded anything he had experienced during standard Marine Corps training. The sight should have triggered group solidarity, but instead it created hesitation as each recruit began to question their individual chances against someone who could neutralize their strongest member with such casual efficiency. The mess hall's atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Conversations ceased at nearby tables as Marines turned their full attention to the confrontation, their expressions ranging from surprise to professional interest as they recognized combat techniques that exceeded standard military training. Sergeant Martinez had moved to the edge of the serving counter, his experienced eyes cataloging Elena's movements with the focused attention of someone who understood exactly what he was witnessing. "You need to release him," Daniels said, his voice lacking the authority he intended as he struggled to reassert control over a situation that had spiraled beyond their comprehension. "We're all Marines here. This doesn't need to escalate further." Elena's response demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking that separated elite operators from conventional forces. She released Morrison's arm while simultaneously repositioning herself to maintain optimal defensive positioning against his four companions, her movement flowing like water while keeping each potential threat within her field of vision. Morrison collapsed to one knee, cradling his injured arm while struggling to understand how someone half his size had rendered him completely helpless. "That was your free demonstration," Elena said, her voice carrying the same calm authority while now including an edge that suggested much more serious consequences for continued aggression. Her stance appeared relaxed to casual observers, but experienced Marines in the audience recognized the fluid balance of someone prepared for immediate violence against multiple opponents. Parker's expression showed the first genuine fear as he began to comprehend that their target possessed training that far exceeded anything they had encountered during their military careers. Williams backed away slightly, his survival instincts finally overriding the group dynamics that had driven them to this confrontation. Rodriguez looked between his injured companion and the woman who had damaged him so efficiently, his face showing confusion rather than anger. The four remaining recruits faced a decision that would determine whether this confrontation ended with Morrison's humiliation or escalated into something that would destroy all their military careers. Elena waited with the patience of someone who had faced much more dangerous opponents in environments where mistakes meant death rather than embarrassment. Daniels made the tactical error that Elena had been anticipating since the confrontation began. His loyalty to Morrison overrode his growing awareness that they faced an opponent beyond their capabilities, causing him to rush forward with the kind of emotional decision-making that separated trained fighters from those who merely possessed physical strength. Elena's response demonstrated why elite military units invested years in combat training that went far beyond conventional Marine Corps instruction. She sidestepped Daniel's charge with minimal movement, using his momentum against him while delivering a precise strike to his solar plexus that emptied his lungs and sent him crashing into the serving counter with enough force to rattle the metal trays. The technique was textbook close-quarters combat, the kind taught in facilities that required security clearances these recruits would never possess. Daniels collapsed against the stainless steel surface, gasping for air while his nervous system struggled to restart normal breathing patterns. The sound of his impact echoed through the mess hall, creating a moment of absolute silence as 200 Marines processed what they were witnessing. Parker's face had gone pale as he watched his second companion neutralized with the same efficient brutality that had disabled Morrison. His calculating mind finally began to grasp that they had cornered someone whose training exceeded anything in their experience, someone who moved with the fluid precision of a predator that had evolved in environments where failure meant death. "This is insane," Williams whispered, his voice carrying disbelief rather than anger as he stared at Elena's relaxed posture. She showed no signs of exertion despite having just disabled two physically superior opponents, her breathing steady and her stance indicating readiness for continued violence if his remaining companions chose to escalate further. Rodriguez had frozen completely, his earlier eagerness to prove himself transformed into paralyzing recognition that they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Morrison remained on one knee, his injured arm hanging useless while he struggled to comprehend how someone he had dismissed as kitchen helped possess combat skills that made his own training seem like children's games. Elena's position allowed her to maintain visual contact with all three remaining opponents while keeping the two disabled recruits in her peripheral vision. Her tactical awareness encompassed the entire mess hall, noting the positions of potential allies among the watching Marines while calculating exit routes and improvised weapons should the situation continue to escalate beyond manageable parameters. Sergeant Martinez had moved closer to the confrontation, his experienced eyes recognizing combat techniques that belonged in classified training manuals rather than standard military instruction. His expression showed professional interest, mixed with growing concern as he began to understand that this woman possessed capabilities that raised questions about her actual assignment and background. The serving line had become an arena where conventional assumptions about physical dominance were being systematically destroyed. Steam continued rising from the food warmers, but the institutional sounds of the mess hall had been replaced by the absolute attention of 200 Marines watching something that challenged everything they thought they knew about combat effectiveness. Parker found his voice first, his tone lacking the aggressive confidence that had characterized their earlier harassment. "Look, maybe we should just walk away from this. Nobody needs to get hurt here." His words carried the desperation of someone finally recognizing that they faced an opponent who could destroy all of them without apparent effort. Elena's response demonstrated the kind of tactical psychology that separated elite operators from conventional forces. "Your friend already got hurt," she said, her voice maintaining the same calm authority while gesturing toward Morrison's obviously damaged arm. "Your other friend is currently having difficulty breathing. Those were consequences of your decisions to escalate this situation beyond verbal harassment." Williams backed away another step, his survival instincts finally overriding the group dynamics that had driven them to this confrontation. His linebacker bulk seemed suddenly irrelevant against someone who moved with a kind of precision that rendered size advantages meaningless. Rodriguez remained frozen, his face showing the confused terror of someone who had discovered that reality operated by rules completely different from his assumptions. The three remaining recruits faced a choice that would determine whether they emerged from this confrontation with merely wounded pride or injuries that would require medical attention. Elena waited with the infinite patience of someone who had faced much more dangerous opponents in environments where hesitation meant death rather than embarrassment. Morrison struggled to his feet, his good arm supporting his weight while his injured limb hung useless at his side. His expression showed dawning comprehension that the woman they had cornered possessed training that exceeded anything in his military experience, capabilities that raised disturbing questions about who she really was and why she had been assigned to kitchen duty at their facility. Williams made the decision that would define the remainder of his military career. Despite watching two of his companions neutralized with surgical precision, his pride refused to accept retreat from someone he still perceived as kitchen staff. His linebacker training kicked in as he charged forward, using his substantial weight advantage in a move that had dominated high school and college opponents. Elena's response revealed training that existed in classifications beyond these recruits' clearance levels. She dropped low, using Williams' momentum to execute a textbook hip throw that sent his 240-pound frame sailing through the air with the kind of leverage that defied basic physics. His body crashed into a nearby table with enough force to collapse the metal frame, sending trays and utensils scattering across the polished concrete floor. The sound of Williams' impact reverberated through the mess hall like a gunshot, followed by the metallic clatter of displaced equipment and the absolute silence of 200 Marines processing what they had just witnessed. Williams lay motionless for several seconds, his nervous system struggling to restart after an impact that had temporarily disrupted his body's basic functions. Parker's hands had begun to shake as he watched his third companion reduced to helplessness by someone who moved with the fluid efficiency of a predator evolved for combat environments these recruits could barely imagine. His calculating mind finally grasped that they had cornered someone whose capabilities exceeded anything in conventional military training, someone who belonged in classifications that required security clearances beyond their access. Rodriguez had backed against the serving counter, his earlier eagerness to prove himself transformed into the paralyzed recognition that they faced an opponent who could destroy experienced Marines with casual efficiency. His face showed the confused terror of someone discovering that reality operated by rules completely different from his assumptions about physical dominance and military hierarchy. Elena's positioning demonstrated tactical awareness that spoke to years of training in environments where spatial control meant survival. She maintained visual contact with Parker and Rodriguez, while keeping Morrison's injured form and Williams' motionless body in her peripheral vision, her stance indicating readiness for continued violence should the situation require further defensive action. Sergeant Martinez had stepped closer to the confrontation, his 20 years of military experience recognizing combat techniques that belonged in classified training facilities rather than standard Marine Corps instruction. His expression showed professional fascination mixed with growing concern as he began to understand that this woman's assignment to kitchen duty represented something far more complex than routine personnel placement. The mess hall had become an amphitheater where conventional military assumptions were being systematically destroyed. Conversations had ceased entirely as Marines watched something that challenged fundamental beliefs about combat effectiveness and the relationship between appearance and capability. The institutional sounds of dinner service had been replaced by the focused attention of an audience witnessing something extraordinary. Morrison struggled to support himself against a nearby table, his good arm trembling with the effort while his injured limb hung useless at his side. His expression showed dawning comprehension that the woman they had dismissed as kitchen helped possess training that raised disturbing questions about her actual identity and the reasons for her presence at their facility. Parker found his voice, though it carried none of the aggressive confidence that had characterized their earlier harassment. "We're done," he said, his words directed more toward Rodriguez than Elena. "This was a mistake. We should leave now." His tone carried the desperate authority of someone trying to prevent further catastrophe while maintaining some semblance of leadership over a situation that had spiraled beyond any possibility of control. Elena's response demonstrated the kind of tactical psychology that separated elite operators from conventional forces. "Your friends made choices that had consequences," she said, her voice maintaining the same calm authority while gesturing toward the 3 disabled recruits scattered around the serving area. "You have the opportunity to make different choices." Rodriguez remained frozen against the serving counter, his survival instincts warring with group loyalty in a battle that would determine whether he emerged from this confrontation with wounded pride or injuries requiring medical attention. Williams groaned softly as consciousness returned, his movements tentative and confused as he struggled to understand how someone half his size had rendered him completely helpless. The 2 remaining standing recruits faced a decision that would define their understanding of military capability and the dangerous assumptions that could result from judging opponents based on appearance rather than actual training. Elena waited with the infinite patience of someone who had faced much more dangerous enemies in environments where miscalculation meant death rather than embarrassment. Parker's survival instincts finally overcame his pride, but Rodriguez made the fatal error of interpreting his companion's retreat as abandonment rather than wisdom. The youngest recruit pushed away from the serving counter with desperate determination, his need to prove himself driving him toward a confrontation that 3 disabled companions should have warned him to avoid. Elena's response demonstrated why military units invested fortunes in training that went beyond conventional combat instruction. She intercepted Rodriguez's advance with a defensive technique that utilized his forward momentum while delivering a precise nerve strike to his shoulder that caused his entire right arm to go instantly numb. Her follow-up movement swept his legs with surgical precision, sending him crashing to the floor with controlled force that minimized permanent damage while maximizing immediate incapacitation. Rodriguez hit the concrete with a sound that echoed through the mess hall like a judge's gavel, his body curling instinctively around the sudden absence of sensation in his dominant arm. The technique had been calculated to disable without causing lasting injury, the kind of restraint that separated professional operators from street fighters who relied on maximum damage rather than tactical precision. Parker had frozen completely, his calculating mind finally processing the mathematical reality that Elena had neutralized 4 physically superior opponents in less than 30 seconds without apparent effort or visible exertion. His hands hung at his sides, no longer shaking, but completely still as his nervous system struggled to accept evidence that contradicted everything he had believed about combat effectiveness and military hierarchy. The mess hall had become a silent amphitheater where 200 Marines witnessed something that challenged fundamental assumptions about appearance versus capability. Elena stood surrounded by 4 disabled recruits, her breathing steady and her posture relaxed while demonstrating control over the situation that spoke to training environments these observers could barely imagine. Morrison remained propped against his table, his injured arm cradled against his chest, while his expression showed the dawning comprehension that they had attacked someone whose capabilities exceeded anything in conventional military experience. His earlier confidence had been replaced by the confused recognition that the woman they had dismissed as Kitchen helped possess skills that raised disturbing questions about her actual identity and assignment. Daniels had managed to restore normal breathing patterns, though he remained slumped against the serving counter with the careful stillness of someone whose nervous system had been traumatized by precise application of force. His eyes tracked Elena's movements with the focused attention of prey animal watching a predator, his mind struggling to reconcile her casual demeanor with the devastating efficiency she had just demonstrated. Williams slowly pushed himself to a sitting position among the scattered remains of the collapsed table, his movements tentative and uncertain as consciousness fully returned. The impact had left him disoriented and confused, his previous assumptions about physical dominance replaced by the humbling recognition that size meant nothing against someone who moved with such calculated precision. Rodriguez writhed on the floor, his left hand clutching his paralyzed right shoulder, while struggling to understand how nerve pathways could simply cease functioning without visible injury. The technique had been designed to demonstrate capability without permanent damage, a professional courtesy that these recruits were too inexperienced to fully appreciate. Elena's positioning allowed her to maintain visual contact with Parker while keeping all 4 disabled companions within her peripheral vision, her tactical awareness encompassing the entire mess hall while calculating potential responses from the growing audience of Marines who had stopped eating to watch the systematic destruction of conventional military assumptions. Sergeant Martinez approached the edge of the confrontation zone, his experienced eyes recognizing combat techniques that belonged in classified training manuals rather than standard Marine Corps instruction. His expression showed professional fascination mixed with growing concern as he began to understand that this situation involved capabilities and classifications beyond routine personnel assignments. Parker's voice emerged as barely more than a whisper when he finally spoke. "Who are you?" The question carried genuine confusion rather than challenge, his mind struggling to reconcile Elena's appearance and assignment with demonstrations of skill that exceeded anything in his military experience. Elena's response revealed nothing while confirming everything. "I'm exactly who I appear to be," she said, her voice maintaining the same calm authority while her stance indicated continued readiness for violence should Parker choose to follow his companion's example. The statement was technically accurate while revealing nothing about classifications that required security clearances beyond these recruits' access levels. The confrontation had reached its mathematical conclusion with 4 neutralized opponents and 1 remaining recruit whose survival instincts had finally overcome his pride. Parker faced a choice that would determine whether he emerged from this encounter with wounded dignity or joined his companions in requiring medical attention for injuries that would be difficult to explain to superior officers. Parker raised his hands in surrender, his survival instincts finally overriding the group dynamics that had driven this catastrophic confrontation. "I'm done," he said, his voice carrying none of the calculated aggression that had characterized his earlier participation. "This was a mistake, a huge mistake." Elena nodded acknowledgement while maintaining her defensive positioning, her tactical awareness encompassing the entire mess hall as 200 Marines processed what they had witnessed. The confrontation had lasted exactly 32 seconds from Morrison's first physical contact to Rodriguez's impact with a concrete floor, a timeline that challenged everything these observers thought they knew about combat duration and effectiveness. The aftermath created a tableau that would become mess hall legend within hours. For recruits in various states of incapacitation surrounded Elena like fallen monuments to overconfidence, their conditions ranging from Morrison's useless arm to Rodriguez's paralyzed shoulder to Williams' concussion-induced confusion. Daniels remained slumped against the serving counter, his breathing finally normalized, but his movement still cautious and limited. Sergeant Martinez stepped into the immediate area, his 20 years of experience allowing him to assess the situation with professional objectivity. Medical attention, he called toward the kitchen staff, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to managing crisis situations. We need corpsmen for these 4 Marines. Elena's demeanor shifted subtly as official attention focused on the scene, her posture remaining alert while demonstrating the kind of respect for military hierarchy that spoke to genuine service rather than civilian employment. Her breathing remained steady despite the physical exertion, her heart rate unchanged in a way that suggested this level of violence represented routine rather than exceptional circumstances. The mess hall's institutional sounds slowly resumed as Marines began processing what they had witnessed while returning to their interrupted meals. Conversations carried undertones of amazement and speculation, voices discussing combat techniques that exceeded standard military training while questioning the identity and background of someone assigned to kitchen duty who moved with such devastating precision. Morrison struggled to his feet with Parker's assistance, his injured arm cradled against his chest, while his expression showed the humiliated recognition that he had attacked someone whose capabilities far exceeded his own. The damage to his elbow would require medical evaluation and possibly surgical intervention, consequences that would follow him throughout his remaining military service. Rodriguez's paralyzed arm had begun showing signs of returning sensation, though his movements remained tentative and uncertain as nerve pathways slowly restored normal function. The technique had been calibrated to demonstrate capability without permanent damage, a professional courtesy that reflected training in environments where restraint was as important as lethality. Williams accepted help from nearby Marines as he struggled to understand how someone half his size had sent him flying through the air with such casual efficiency. His previous assumptions about physical dominance had been replaced by the sobering recognition that size meant nothing against someone who possessed technical skills that transformed leverage into overwhelming force. Daniels pushed himself away from the serving counter with careful movements, his solar plexus still tender from the precise strike that had temporarily paralyzed his breathing. His eyes tracked Elena's position with the focused attention of someone who had learned to respect capabilities he could not comprehend or replicate. Elena's positioning allowed her to observe the developing response while maintaining readiness for continued defensive action should circumstances require additional violence. Her tactical awareness noted the arrival of medical personnel, the positioning of military police who had been summoned by witnesses, and the growing crowd of Marines who had abandoned their meals to witness the aftermath of something extraordinary. The serving line remained empty except for Elena and the scattered evidence of confrontation, steam still rising from food warmers that had continued operating throughout the violence. The institutional smells of military cooking mixed with the subtle tension that followed combat, creating an atmosphere charged with questions that could not be answered without revealing classifications beyond most observers' clearance levels. Parker remained beside Morrison, his expression showing the confused recognition that they had initiated violence against someone whose training exceeded anything in their experience. His calculating mind struggled to reconcile Elena's appearance and assignment with demonstrations of skill that raised disturbing questions about her actual identity and the reasons for her presence at their facility. The mathematical precision of Elena's response had left 4 experienced Marines requiring medical attention, while she showed no signs of exertion or injury. The disparity challenged fundamental assumptions about combat effectiveness, while demonstrating capabilities that belonged in classifications these recruits would never access throughout their military careers. Medical personnel arrived with equipment designed for training injuries rather than the systematic incapacitation they encountered among the 4 disabled recruits. Corporal Hayes arrived with the medical team, his paramedic training allowing him to assess the 4 injured recruits with professional efficiency. His examination revealed damage patterns that spoke to precise application of force rather than random violence, techniques that demonstrated surgical knowledge of human anatomy and nerve function that exceeded standard combat training. That's a hyperextended elbow with possible ligament damage, Hayes reported while examining Morrison's injured arm. The joint manipulation required exact knowledge of pressure points and leverage mechanics. He moved to Rodriguez, whose shoulder showed signs of targeted nerve disruption, temporary paralysis from strike to the brachial plexus. Textbook precision. Elena remained positioned near the serving line, her demeanor respectful toward medical personnel while maintaining the alert posture of someone prepared for continued defensive action. Her breathing remained steady despite the recent violence, her heart rate unchanged in a way that suggested this level of confrontation represented routine rather than exceptional circumstances. Staff Sergeant Chun emerged from the crowd of observing Marines, his expression showing professional interest mixed with growing suspicion as he began to understand that this incident involved capabilities beyond routine military training. His 15 years of service included deployments with special operations units, experience that allowed him to recognize techniques that belonged in classified environments. Daniels, can you describe what happened here? Chun asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to investigating unusual incidents. The recruit struggled to find words that could adequately convey what he had experienced, his mind still processing the speed and precision of Elena's defensive techniques. She moved like nothing I've ever seen, Daniels finally managed, his voice carrying confusion rather than anger. We thought she was just kitchen staff, but she knew things. Combat things that aren't taught in basic training or even advanced courses. His statement drew murmurs from nearby Marines who had witnessed the systematic neutralization of 4 physically superior opponents. Elena's positioning allowed her to observe the developing investigation while noting the professional interest of Staff Sergeant Chun, whose experience with special operations suggested recognition of techniques that required security clearances beyond these Marines' access levels. Her tactical awareness encompassed potential responses should official scrutiny threaten operational security. Williams accepted assistance from medical personnel as they evaluated his condition following the devastating hip throw that had sent him crashing through furniture. The technique had utilized his momentum and body weight against him with leverage that defied basic physics, demonstrating training in environments where such skills meant survival rather than demonstration. Hayes continued his examination with growing professional fascination. These injuries show restraint, he reported to Staff Sergeant Chun. Maximum incapacitation with minimal permanent damage. The kind of precision that requires years of specialized training in controlled application of force. His assessment carried implications that challenged assumptions about Elena's assignment and background. Rodriguez flexed his fingers as sensation gradually returned to his paralyzed arm, the nerve function restoring according to precise calculations that had determined the duration of his incapacitation. The technique had been designed to demonstrate overwhelming capability while avoiding lasting injury, a professional courtesy these recruits were too inexperienced to fully appreciate. Parker remained beside Morrison, his expression showing dawning comprehension that they had attacked someone whose identity and capabilities raised questions beyond their clearance levels. His calculating mind struggled to reconcile Elena's appearance and kitchen assignment with demonstrations of skill that belonged in classifications he would never access throughout his military career. Staff Sergeant Chun approached Elena with the careful respect of someone who had begun to suspect that routine personnel assignments did not explain the combat techniques he had witnessed. "Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions about this incident," he said, his tone carrying professional courtesy rather than accusation. Elena's response demonstrated the kind of operational discipline that separated classified personnel from conventional military forces. These Marines initiated physical contact after verbal harassment escalated beyond acceptable parameters, she replied, her voice maintaining calm authority while providing legally accurate information without revealing capabilities that required security clearances. The mess hall atmosphere had shifted from shock silence to focused speculation as Marines discussed what they had witnessed while trying to understand how someone assigned to kitchen duty possessed combat skills that exceeded their own training. Conversations carried undertones of professional respect, mixed with confusion about classifications and assignments that seemed to contradict observable capabilities. Chen's experience with special operations allowed him to recognize the careful phrasing of Elena's response, the kind of precise language that provided necessary information while protecting classified details. His expression showed growing understanding that this incident involved personnel and capabilities beyond routine base assignments, situations that required notification of higher authorities. Medical personnel completed their assessment of the 4 injured recruits, their findings confirming damage patterns that spoke to professional training in combat techniques that belonged in facilities requiring security clearances these Marines would never possess. Major Blackwood entered the mess hall with the purposeful stride of someone summoned to address a situation that had escalated beyond routine disciplinary matters. His arrival created immediate changes in posture and attention among the assembled Marines, conversations ceasing as personnel recognized command authority entering their midst. Staff Sergeant Chun approached the Major with visible relief, his expression showing the professional satisfaction of someone transferring responsibility for a situation that exceeded his classification level. "Sir, we have an incident involving assault charges against kitchen personnel that resulted in 4 injured recruits requiring medical attention," he reported, his tone carrying implications that suggested complexities beyond routine harassment cases. Elena maintained her position near the serving line, her demeanor shifting to demonstrate appropriate military bearing, while her tactical awareness noted the Major's approach and the continued presence of medical personnel attending to the 4 disabled recruits. Her posture remained alert without appearing defensive, the kind of professional composure that spoke to genuine military service rather than civilian employment. Major Blackwood's examination of the scene revealed damage patterns that challenged his assumptions about kitchen staff capabilities. For physically imposing recruits in various states of incapacitation, while their supposed victim showed no signs of injury or exertion, suggested a situation that required careful investigation and possibly classified consultation. "Corpsman, what's your assessment of these injuries?" the Major asked Hayes, whose medical examination had revealed precision that exceeded standard combat training. The response would determine whether this incident required routine disciplinary action or notification of higher command authorities with appropriate security clearances. "Sir, these injuries demonstrate surgical knowledge of human anatomy and nerve function," Hayes reported, his professional assessment carrying implications that went beyond routine military training. "The techniques show maximum incapacitation with minimal permanent damage, suggesting specialized instruction in controlled application of force." Elena observed the developing investigation with the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to official scrutiny while maintaining operational discipline that protected classified information. Her breathing remained steady despite the focused attention of command personnel, her heart rate unchanged in a way that suggested experience with situations requiring careful management of official interest. Major Blackwood approached Elena with the careful respect of someone who had begun to suspect that routine personnel assignments did not explain the combat demonstration he was investigating. "Ma'am, I need to understand exactly what happened here and what training background allowed you to neutralize 4 Marine recruits," he said, his tone carrying professional courtesy mixed with growing suspicion about her actual classification. Elena's response demonstrated the kind of operational discipline that separated classified personnel from conventional military forces. "Major, These recruits initiated verbal harassment that escalated to physical assault when one grabbed my shoulder, she replied, her voice maintaining calm authority while providing legally accurate information without revealing capabilities that required security clearances beyond his access. The Major's expression showed recognition of carefully phrased language that provided necessary information while protecting classified details. His 15 years of service included exposure to special operations personnel, experience that allowed him to recognize the professional restraint that characterized interactions between classified and conventional forces. Morrison struggled to his feet with medical assistance, his injured arm immobilized while his expression showed the humiliated recognition that he had attacked someone whose capabilities far exceeded his own understanding. The consequences of his aggression would follow him throughout his remaining military service, a permanent reminder of the dangerous assumptions that had led to this confrontation. Rodriguez flexed his fingers as full sensation returned to his temporarily paralyzed arm, the precision of the nerve strike becoming apparent as function restored according to calculated timelines. The technique had been designed to demonstrate overwhelming capability while avoiding permanent damage, restraint that reflected training in environments where escalation control was as important as combat effectiveness. Williams remained seated among the scattered debris of the collapsed table, his concussion symptoms gradually clearing while he struggled to understand how someone half his size had utilized his momentum and body weight against him with such devastating efficiency. His previous assumptions about physical dominance had been replaced by sobering recognition of technical superiority. Daniels completed his medical evaluation while maintaining careful distance from Elena, his movements still cautious following the precise strike that had temporarily paralyzed his breathing. His eyes tracked her position with the focused attention of someone who had learned to respect capabilities beyond his comprehension. Major Blackwood's investigation had reached the point where routine disciplinary procedures would be inadequate to address the implications of what had occurred. The systematic neutralization of 4 recruits by someone assigned to kitchen duty suggested classifications and capabilities that required notification of command authorities with appropriate security clearances and need-to-know authorization. Colonel Harrison entered the mess hall with the confident bearing of someone whose security clearance encompassed information that would resolve the developing investigation. His arrival prompted immediate attention from Major Blackwood, whose expression showed relief at transferring responsibility for a situation that had exceeded his classification parameters. "Ma'am," the colonel said, approaching Elena with the professional respect reserved for personnel whose capabilities commanded recognition regardless of apparent assignment. "I believe we need to discuss your operational status and the circumstances that led to this demonstration of your training." Elena's posture shifted subtly as she recognized command authority with appropriate clearance levels, her demeanor maintaining operational discipline while demonstrating the kind of professional acknowledgement that characterized interactions between classified personnel. "Sir," she replied, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to such consultations. The colonel's examination of the 4 injured recruits revealed damage patterns that confirmed his suspicions about Elena's actual training and assignment. Morrison's hyperextended elbow, Rodriguez's precisely targeted nerve disruption, Williams' controlled application of leverage, and Daniel's surgical strike to the solar plexus demonstrated techniques that belonged in facilities requiring the highest security classifications. Major Blackwood approached the colonel with visible confusion about the developing situation. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand the implications of what occurred here," he said, his tone carrying the professional frustration of someone operating beyond his need-to-know parameters. "This appears to involve capabilities that exceed my clearance level." Elena observed the exchange between command personnel while maintaining the alert posture of someone prepared for continued operational requirements. Her tactical awareness encompassed the entire mess hall, noting the focused attention of Marines who had witnessed something extraordinary while recognizing that official explanations would necessarily remain incomplete. Colonel Harrison's response demonstrated the kind of operational security that protected classified personnel and missions from unnecessary exposure. Major, this Marine is operating under assignment parameters that require compartmentalized information. He explained, his voice carrying authority that ended further inquiry while protecting details beyond Blackwood's clearance. The revelation created immediate changes in atmosphere as Marines throughout the mess hall began to understand that they had witnessed something involving classifications beyond their access levels. Elena's systematic neutralization of 4 recruits suddenly made sense within the context of elite military training that existed in facilities requiring security clearances these personnel would never possess. Morrison struggled to process the implications of what the colonel had revealed, his injured arm serving as permanent reminder that he had attacked someone whose capabilities far exceeded his understanding. The consequences of his aggression would follow him throughout his military career, a sobering lesson about the dangerous assumptions that had led to this confrontation. Rodriguez flexed his fully restored arm, while comprehending that the precision of the nerve strike represented training in environments where such techniques meant survival rather than demonstration. His temporary paralysis had been calculated to exact duration, restraint that reflected professional discipline rather than random violence. Williams remained among the scattered debris of the collapsed table, his understanding of the hip throw technique transformed by recognition that Elena's training encompassed capabilities that belonged in elite military classifications. His previous assumptions about physical dominance had been replaced by respect for technical superiority that defied conventional understanding. Daniels completed his recovery from the solar plexus strike while maintaining respectful distance from Elena, his movements reflecting newfound appreciation for someone whose assignment to kitchen duty had been operational cover rather than routine personnel placement. His eyes showed the focused attention of someone who had learned important lessons about judging others based on appearance. Parker stood beside his injured companions with the sobering recognition that their harassment had targeted someone whose actual capabilities could have resulted in much more serious consequences. Elena's restraint had prevented permanent damage while demonstrating overwhelming superiority that challenged everything they thought they knew about military hierarchy. The mess hall atmosphere had shifted from shocked speculation to respectful recognition as Marines processed the colonel's carefully worded explanation. Elena's presence among them suddenly made sense within the context of operational assignments that required personnel with capabilities beyond conventional military training. Colonel Harrison's investigation had reached its logical conclusion with official recognition of Elena's status and the circumstances that had led to her defensive actions. The systematic neutralization of 4 recruits represented appropriate response to assault rather than excessive force. Professional judgment that reflected training in environments where restraint was as important as effectiveness. Elena maintained her position near the serving line while observing the completed investigation, her operational discipline protecting classified details while demonstrating the kind of professional competence that commanded respect from personnel regardless of their clearance levels. The confrontation had ended with official vindication and recognition of her actual capabilities and status. 3 weeks later, the mess hall operated under a completely transformed dynamic where Elena's presence commanded the kind of respectful recognition that her actual capabilities had always deserved. Marines approached the serving line with professional courtesy that acknowledged her status, while maintaining the operational security that protected classified details from unnecessary exposure. Morrison had returned to duty with limited use of his injured arm, the medical evaluation requiring 3 months of physical therapy that would serve as permanent reminder of the dangerous assumptions that had led to his confrontation with someone whose training exceeded his understanding. His behavior toward Elena demonstrated the kind of respectful distance that characterized interactions between conventional forces and classified personnel. Rodriguez completed his recovery with full restoration of nerve function, the precision of Elena's technique becoming legendary among Marines who had witnessed the systematic neutralization of 4 recruits in 32 seconds. His temporary paralysis had taught important lessons about judging others based on appearance rather than actual capabilities, wisdom that would influence his remaining military service. Williams returned from medical leave with newfound appreciation for technical superiority that transcended physical advantages. His previous assumptions about dominance replaced by recognition that leverage and precision could overcome size and strength when applied by someone with elite training. His respectful behavior toward Elena reflected professional acknowledgement of her superior capabilities. Daniels approached the serving line with careful movements that demonstrated lasting memory of the solar plexus strike that had temporarily paralyzed his breathing. His interactions with Elena maintained appropriate military courtesy while avoiding the casual familiarity that might suggest forgetting the professional distance required between personnel of different classification levels. Parker had become something approaching Elena's unofficial defender among the recruit population, his calculating mind having processed the mathematical reality that she had neutralized 4 physically superior opponents without apparent effort. His protective behavior served as effective deterrent against similar confrontations while demonstrating the transformed perspective that resulted from witnessing genuine elite capabilities. Elena continued her assignment with the quiet professionalism that characterized personnel whose actual duties required operational cover rather than routine military service. Her presence in the mess hall served multiple purposes beyond food service, maintaining position that allowed observation and assessment while protecting classified activities through mundane appearance. Staff Sergeant Chun had developed professional relationship with Elena that acknowledged her superior training while maintaining operational security protocols that protected classified information from personnel without appropriate clearance levels. His experience with special operations allowed him to provide appropriate support without requiring explanations that would compromise security. Major Blackwood's interactions with Elena demonstrated the kind of respectful recognition that characterized relationships between command personnel and classified operators whose capabilities exceeded conventional understanding. His investigation had taught important lessons about assumptions and the complex realities of military assignments that serve purposes beyond apparent functions. Colonel Harrison maintained oversight of Elena's assignment with satisfaction that operational requirements were being met while personnel security remained intact. The incident had demonstrated that her cover assignment provided effective concealment while allowing continuation of activities that required presence within conventional military environments without arousing suspicion. The transformation extended throughout the base as word spread about the mess hall confrontation that had revealed capabilities belonging in elite military classifications. Marines approached interactions with kitchen staff with newfound respect, understanding that appearances could be deceiving when dealing with personnel whose actual assignments required operational cover. Elena's legend had become part of base culture. The story of 5 recruits who had cornered someone they assumed was vulnerable only to discover they faced a trained operator whose restraint had prevented much more serious consequences. The tale served as effective deterrent against harassment, while reinforcing important lessons about respecting others regardless of apparent assignment. Before the story ends, drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character, or if you've witnessed similar situations where hidden strength emerged when least expected. Maybe you know someone who surprised everyone with capabilities nobody saw coming. The mess hall continued operating with the kind of professional atmosphere that resulted from understanding that military service encompassed personnel with capabilities and assignments beyond visible roles. Elena's presence among them had taught lasting lessons about assumptions and the importance of treating others with respect regardless of their apparent duties. Her quiet satisfaction came from successful mission completion rather than recognition, the knowledge that operational requirements had been met while maintaining security protocols that protected classified activities. The confrontation had ended with appropriate consequences for aggressive behavior, while demonstrating that appearances could be fatally deceiving when dealing with personnel whose training transcended conventional military education. The transformed dynamic would continue long after Elena's assignment ended. a lasting legacy of respect and professionalism that honored the complex realities of military service in environments where capabilities and assignments often exceeded visible evidence.